Afternoon, everyone. We have 4 o'clock Central Time, and today, February 8th, 2024, would be the appointed time and place for the Bismarck Renaissance Zone Authority's monthly meeting. It says 23 on the agenda, just so you know. We'll fix that. So welcome, and welcome our newest authority member, County Commissioner Wayne Munson. I don't know if you've had a chance to be introduced to the audience, or if you care to be, or if you want to say a few, nothing. Okay.
I talk enough.
So we're happy to have a representative of Burleigh County at the table. We do have a quorum either in person or by Zoom. I understand Dustin is with us somewhere out there. Dustin, you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, welcome. First item on the agenda would be to consider the minutes of the December 14th, 2023 meeting. Any questions, comments, changes, corrections?
Move approval as submitted.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Now we'll move on to the regular agenda. There are no requests for Renaissance Zone approval or downtown design reapproval. There's no Renaissance Zone or downtown design review applications, so we can adjourn the meeting. Oh, Isaac. So, item 2 on the agenda, review of the Renaissance Zone Development Plan, Ordinance, and Bylaws, which Isaac is going to walk us through.
Well, sort of. So, Chair Christensen and authority members, I'll give a brief overview and introduction, but then I'll hand it off to Daniel for more details. So, as you are all aware, there has been a letter of intent between the city and the county stipulating some items to change in the processes for the Renaissance Zone Authority and the Renaissance Zone program while we're bringing the program back. Officially, the program is back now. We have a signed memorandum of agreement with the Commerce Department that is effective now until January 3rd, 2024. The reason for January 3rd is because that is when they sort of approved the development plan on their end, even though the signing of documents between the city and the county happened a little while after that. But officially, the program is back. As you noted, we do not have anything before us today for DDR or Renaissance Zone projects, but the website has been updated again to include the applications, so we are accepting applications. We've had some interest for either DDR or Renaissance Zone projects, but no formal applications yet. So the next steps, as we are continuing this process of reviewing the development plan, the ordinances and bylaws, there are some things to update there to include the new members on the authority to change the exemption of the property tax for projects, as well as how further changes to the development plan will be reviewed. And with that, I will hand things over to Daniel to provide a more in-depth review of what that process will look like.
Thank you, Isaac. Welcome, Daniel Nairn.
Okay, and good evening, Chair, authority members. I won't go into too much depth. There is a memo here that was included in part of your packet. And basically that goes through the development plan section by section and just outlines. We flagged the things that we thought needed to be changed to meet the intent of the letter, or the letter of intent. We also flagged a few things that could be updated and just changed for usability of the plan itself. We would like to add a section on definitions. This is a recommendation from Authority Member Fink, and I think this will help everyone reading the plan understand what we mean by especially the important terms such as current taxable value, the authority itself, and for legal purposes. This is a plan, but it also functions as sort of in a quasi-legal way. It is our regulation for these projects. So I think that is appropriate to give that as well. A few things just to highlight that were clear changes that needed to be made. We would recommend adding a new section on project exemptions. Currently, the development plan doesn't actually outline at all what the benefit is of the program. And that was really just because we were relying on the state law and we didn't change it at all. However, we do need to change how that is formulated, and so I would recommend including it as a separate section. So there are a couple of questions that you may want to address and direct staff for that, and that's outlined in the plan, and we can discuss those this evening. There are some changes as well to the administrative roles and responsibilities, and that is outlined on page 4 of the memo. And that, of course, would be to include representation from Burley County, the school board, and a park board. And in doing so, we may want to reduce one of the 6 at-large members as well in order to have an odd number of authority members in the end. As you recall, Commissioner or Authority Member Munson is technically serving as one of those board members for this time interim period, and so it would that could be something you could consider there. There will need to be change to how the development plan is amended. Currently, right now, it simply states the City Commission does that. However, we know that it needs to involve the other political subdivisions as well. So, and how exactly that process would be handled should be spelled out in the development plan. We know that each entity should have a vote. I would like you to consider what would occur if there was a tie between the 4 political subdivisions and how that would be handled. And so those are the main changes to the Renaissance Zone Development Plan. We will also need to change the ordinance. That's fairly simple. Well, the language could be fairly simple. We would recommend simply allowing the City Commission to delegate that authority to appoint Renaissance Zone Authority members to the other political subdivisions without necessarily spelling out which subdivisions that would be delegated to. And that way, the parks or the school board would get to decide on their own. And if they wish to not participate, that would be an option as well. Of course, the ordinance takes a little longer to change. It does go through a first reading and a second reading with the City Commission to do so. So we'd recommend just keeping the language fairly broad in the ordinance and then using the development plan to spell out more clearly how that would play out. So and then finally, the bylaws. You do have bylaws that are set by this body, and you create them for yourself, and you can change them at will. The only requirement is to notify the public prior to making changes. So there may not need to be many changes to the bylaws. The only change that could be necessary is what occurs if there's failure to attend a meeting over a certain number of times. Right now it says the City Commission may remove a member. However, it wouldn't make sense to give that authority for someone who had been appointed by another body. So that's something to consider, as well as the how the quorum may operate if there's appointments that are not being utilized. So those are 2 things. As far as the process for revising these, as we look through this, we do not think we will need the entire year to get this done. Really, if we can get some recommended language to you by perhaps the next meeting for you to look over, we could initiate this and probably even by the summer have it completed if that's your wish, unless there's more time you need to decide on the language. We have until January 5th. That's the date that the Department of Commerce originally approved our development plan. It took a little longer to get the memorandum of agreement through the commission, but that's the date that they're using for our 1-year extension. So as long as we have it extended by that time, we're fine. As staff, we would recommend, since we do need to go to all of the political subdivisions for the development plan amendments, that we also ask for their support for the program for the additional 5 years at that time. So we would just be going one time for each meeting. And by the time we're going for the development plan amendments, the City Commission and you would already have approved that development plan, so there would be some assurance that it would be carried forward. If you have any questions for me, I can answer them, and if not, we can go into more details too.
Questions of staff or Daniel at this point? Ms. Guy.
Thank you. I do have a couple of things that I'd like to get clarified, if I could, Daniel. On page 2, under the history of the Renaissance Zone program, the last bullet talks about updating or removing the map of current and approved Renaissance Zone projects. I think updating is great, but I'm curious why we'd want to remove that map.
Oh, sure. Authority member Guy, there would be no reason to remove it. I think it would just be an option. We just couldn't leave it as is because the projects are no longer current in the plan.
Right. And then under the project exemptions, which would be a new section, the very last paragraph talked about an alternative approach to allow each of the taxing entities to participate at a lower rate than the 100%. Is that something that we've decided we want to do as a body? Should
I
we
don't think
talk
we've
about that?
decided anything.
Should we talk about that now? Or do you
We
want to
can
wait
talk- we
until they
can-
bring something back?
We can go through these point by point,
Oh,
right? I think
okay.
that would make sense, because I don't think we ever decided, quote unquote, to adjust the rate. So,
Okay.
yeah. Go.
I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, I think it would be a good idea if we could work out some language. Because I think it would make the difference between maybe one of the political subdivisions agreeing or not agreeing. And so if our continuation, is dependent on all of them agreeing, then I think we should try and be as flexible as we can.
Okay. I'm also curious how this will work. If we approve a plan at this table, it gets approved by the city commission, then it goes to the other bodies? And then they want to make changes? Joe?
So my
Daniel?
understanding is that is how it would work. Hopefully we could, I'm sorry, you could approve a plan that would meet the intent that was spelled out in the letter, and then that way it could go through each of the boards
Sure.
and be approved as is.
Okay. Joe?
Just as currently, that's not how it works, right? Right now, it works like it always has. The plan would have to be changed to define how that change is going to work going forward. So if we make changes to this, which include a structure in which other subs need to have input before the city commission implements a new plan, then that's part of what we have to develop to get it done. Right now, it's just, the plan is as it came out. And now it's up to us to get that process in place and in the plan, and for us to understand how it all works. Okay,
So,
want to make sure I was,
That's why we're here. Yeah.
so Joe, let me see if I understand how maybe you're envisioning this might work. Let's say, for example, I'm just going to pull some percentages out of the air. Let's say the county wanted to improve rather than 100% exemption, maybe they want to approve 75, and the park board wants to approve 25, and schools want to approve like 50. So then would it be that way for every project? That's what they've agreed to for every project. They wouldn't change those percentages by the project.
so the vision that I had in trying to resolve the issues that came up with getting approval through the county this last time was a pretty clear definition that the county, and I don't think me personally looking at moving forward, what the city has said it was willing to do is, as of now, a project would need to have not 100% exemption, because there needs to be a base that continues to have taxable value going
Right.
forward. That plan doesn't, that's not in the plan now, but I hope city staff is directing those that are inquiring, that's likely something that you're not going to get. You're not going to get 100% exemption. So I think there needs to be a difference between, so you have to define what the current taxable value is. And then later we'll figure out what the increasable taxable value is. But if the county says, we don't want you to mess with the base, that's the current taxable value. The city doesn't care about the base. The city, and the more that gets exempted, the more effective the program remains to be, in my opinion. So if we can separate out, there is a current taxable value for every project, and there is a new taxable value for every project, whatever that project may be, it continues to be taxed or assessed for each separate district at a different percentage, which is agreed upon in the plan. And that portion of the plan, along with probably a few other things, are things that you would need to go and seek approval from those other boards to change. But if we're going to make a text amendment outside of those, where it's a simple change, if it's we're going to remove this block because it's completely completed, we're going to add a block because we've said we were willing to go in that neighborhood and a project needs to be able to use Renaissance, those are already in the plan, and to go to all of those members every time you want to make any change, I think is not a good approach. But the county has certainly made up some good points of, look, we're approving a plan and you guys can just change it whenever you want. That ain't okay. So we can say these things you can't change without going to these other districts. But you can, and I had emailed Daniel some text that I had put some thought into, but it's identifying every district that's on your tax statement. The city has a 100% current tax exemption, and talk about the post-tax. And you go down the state, the school district, the park, and the only change that isn't 100% because of what we have approved now is that the county's current taxable value exemption would be 0, and everything else would be 100%. Now, what needs to be agreed upon in what I envision was that percentage. And each of those districts would need to tell us what that what percentage gets you to say, yes, this is a worthwhile plan to approve.
I think part of Nancy's question was it project-specific on the exemption?
Correct.
That's what I heard, and that would be an
And-
absolute
'cause
nightmare.
It would be, and that was my concern,
But
so I wanted to make sure that
I mean, it needs to be a
what you're
policy that
thinking
says
is
X.
what you just described.
And I would say, our current plan allows for the same thing. It's up to 100% exemption, correct?
Correct.
We can, according to Century Code, decide, look, this is only worth 25% exemption on before tax or after tax. What we're looking at is saying the county's pre-tax portion would be allowed to be up to 0 on current taxable value. Post or new taxable value would be hopefully 100%. That it would be anything above that base, because of the improvements made to that project, would still receive an exemption to ad valorem taxation.
It might be helpful, if, sorry to interrupt you, Joe, but could you just summarize the letter of intent for us? What did the city commission agree that we would do, that this body would do?
Sure. So there were a few points. The one relevant to this discussion is that we would essentially freeze the valuation at the base level at the time of an application, and then only grant the property tax exemption to the increment
The
between
increment.
what's frozen and above.
So it's 100% of the current value?
Correct.
For the county.
No.
Well,
And that's the argument. That's the argument that I keep coming back and forth from. This is a city thing, and to make the county happy and say yes to the plan, that needs to be 0 for the county. The parks have already said, yeah, 100% on both. You're good. The city can make a decision on how much it wants to exempt from its district on both current and post, and that's more nuanced than what the letter of intent currently says. I will
That's
grant
right.
you that. So
Right,
it's a matter
yeah.
of what are we talking about here?
yeah, currently the letter of intent would apply that across the boards to cities, parks, schools,
Schools.
county. Everyone would follow that same scheme. So we did not discuss with the city commission or the county commission the idea of
Yep.
differentiating between the different political subdivisions. One thing I do want to add when I raised this with the Department of Commerce, they didn't have a solid answer for me directly, but they did state that they wanted to see an attorney general's opinion on whether allowing the political subdivisions to vary their participation would still meet the terms of community support. That's one of the state law requirements, and especially if a political subdivision were to participate at a level of 0, they are not sure yet, without the Attorney General weighing in, whether that would be community support.
I personally think they have that's not valid at all. I mean, you know Century Code and you've read it plenty, right, Daniel? I mean, you understand where the current community support is mentioned 3 times in the entirety of the Renaissance zone. It is in one paragraph tied to the plan. The plan needs to be approved by the subs, the other districts, rather. It's not a community support of how we're going to, you come up with the plan, and does that plan receive approval from the districts? If it's approved from the districts, Century Code also says the city can do all or nothing. They can do some or a portion of, or all or a portion of. I mean, Commerce is going to do what they want to be able to do on that. I just don't see how that's even a question.
Well, I think the question comes up if you give one political sub special treatment versus another, right? Is that what Commerce is telling you?
Well, I mean, that's probably part of their concern, but I think they're really just looking at the interpretation of that word community support and whether
For the plan.
offering 0% participation constitutes community support. I think what they're telling me their concern is.
I think that we should pursue that Attorney General's opinion, because if they don't feel like it's something they should have an opinion on, they'll tell us that. And so if they feel the way you do, they'll just say, we don't have an opinion on this,
It's really not up to us.
go forth.
If Commerce says they're going to get an Attorney General's opinion, they're going to get, But we should ask for it if it's coming sooner
And
rather
that's,
than later.
they would like it to be a request made, because made by you, rather than just me, asking for it. So that's why it would be, because this is a deviation from the letter of intent that the city commission issued. So it would need to have some official request made.
Joe?
Yeah, and I wouldn't intend for us to make such a drastic change different from what the city has already promised to do without saying, hey, this is what we're thinking, how we're going to work through what we've, now we're getting into some nuance. The city, I would assume, believes this program worthwhile. And to make this program as beneficial as possible, exempting as much as it possibly can from that taxation like it had in the past makes the most sense to be able to make the program continue to be successful. So to appease the county and saying, no, we're not going to mess with your taxable base, but the city looking at that and saying, no, to make this program as effective as possible, we would like to exempt our taxable base. I don't see how, I want to speak for the county commissioners, but I don't see how you'd care.
We wouldn't care as long as it's not our base that you're playing with.
Well, I don't-
That's the county commission's concern.
I don't
It
think
valid.
anyone's suggesting that the other political subdivisions care what each other's percentages are. I think we're just asking each of them separately what they want their percentage to be.
That was my intent. Is
Right.
that we would okay that or get a number, hopefully it's 100%, and I think the city and this board can make an argument why it should be 100%. I don't think we're going to get that from the county.
No.
But I can also see in that act of the county has said, no, this is something that, one of those subs has said, no, this is something that we need to be able to say yes to your plan. That the school board look at it and say, well, no, we want that too. We don't want to exempt that either. We want you to leave our tax base alone. The more subs that do that, the less effective this program becomes. So
Mr. Chairman?
the city needs to make an
If you
argument
put it out
about
there-
why it should be 100%.
Well, absolutely, but if you put it out there, that's a risk you take.
It's either that or
Or
you
we
say it's
don't
all or
offer
nothing. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, Dustin would like to jump in.
Yeah.
We forget that he's not at, go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, so I have one question for Daniel to start out with, and so we've been talking about percentages. Has Commerce given you any indication that there is any reason why we can't exclude current taxable value from the exemption?
Attorney Member Gavrila, we can do that.
Okay.
Everything in the letter of intent could be done at the opinion of the Department of Commerce.
So I think that if we want to avoid getting into 4 different arguments at the same time with each political sub, we at the table need to come to the decision as to whether we are going to exclude current taxable value from all, from the exemption from all political subdivisions. And then from that point, determine whether we want to go beyond that when it comes to the actual exemption itself. And I think that what Joe is getting at is very critical, and this might require a subcommittee type of thing where we can work with staff to develop a checklist that we can create for each political subdivision and go to them and say, okay, here are the things that we think that there are variables that need to be determined in our development plan before we can approve it and deliver it to each political subdivision for approval. And developing that checklist first and then approaching each political subdivision with that will give us a kind of an idea of how much we have to do, because we can talk ourselves into circles as far as how much customization each political sub is going to do. But if we're willing to just accept that we're going to exclude the baseline from the exemption for all circumstances, except for maybe the city, if the city wants to make that on a case-by-case basis, that's easier for them. But if you get into a system where every political sub is making a determination on each project, you're going to have 3 to 6 months of meetings on each project, and that's not feasible. So I think that we need to come to a conclusion at the table as to what variables we are looking at, what we want to deal with, and perhaps develop a subcommittee to look at that, bring it to the full authority, and then take that checklist to each political sub and explain to them what is going on here. The county is the most involved in creating demands on this. The other entities probably at this point don't necessarily want to micromanage the situation, but if we start treating the county better than the schools and parks, we're going to have a problem. So I think that the best thing to do is to figure out what we are willing to put onto that checklist and then circulate that around, and making sure that it satisfies the demands of the county first and foremost, but then also treating the others equally, because it's just going to be a nightmare otherwise.
Okay, my hope would be that we could arrive at a checklist today, but maybe I'm being overly optimistic. And I would also think it would be very helpful, and it might require a lot of work from staff to know from a dollar standpoint what we're talking about in actual differences of 100%. You know, there was one outlier project, right, that drove everybody crazy because they came in with the exemption on $1 million base value or whatever it was. In reality, are we talking about a lot of money? I mean, that's not fair to Daniel without giving, but yeah. Kirsten?
And just because I'm kind of all new to this, can we get like an example, like that $1 million and actually see it out of what those numbers would look like? So if we have 1,000,
Sure.
what
So
that would look like.
Yeah, Chair, Authority Member DeVark, we can certainly provide that for you. And just off the cuff, I mean, the new construction projects will have no impact at all. They're pretty much entirely new value. It's the ones that you're referring to, the rehabilitation, especially the ones that are maybe just at the line
Right.
And are already good buildings. But yeah, the vast majority will not be impacted.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if this is much to do about nothing or little. Obviously, it's not nothing, but in the overall $100 million scheme of things, I mean, in terms of projects, it would be interesting to know. And you can't go back 20 years and look at each one individually, but the last 4 or 5 years or whatever you'd be comfortable with to give us an idea of what difference would it actually make financially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can get that information.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say, okay, anecdotal or just looking at how this program works, the lesser the more you go down keeping base value and going from there, the less renovation projects this board will see. It will
True.
make less financial sense for that to happen.
True. Okay.
And if part of this project or part of this program is to encourage removal of blight, we're going to continue to a downward slope of being effective there.
I agree. Nancy?
So I think from what I'm hearing Dustin say is that if we allow the county to have a zero exemption on that base value, then we have to give that option from 0 to 100 to the other two subs, because we have to treat them all the same, including the city. So,
But I go back. Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
I think Nancy's right. You have to give them the opportunity.
right.
they can choose one way or the other. And I agree, once they've chosen, then that's the value moving forward for the next 5 years.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Okay.
Exactly what I envisioned.
Yep.
They need to be able to approve the plan. What
Right.
gets the yes at that table?
Right.
Is it 25%? Is it 0? Is it 100? Right now, it's 100. They've already approved and said, we're willing to support what you guys had for the next 5 years,
So
with the exception of the county.
Except, yep,
So the decision on the checklist then on that item would be, what amount do you want between 0 and 100? Okay,
Of the base going in value or of the
the base.
increment? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Just so I'm clear, that means the base value at all.
Current taxable value.
Okay.
Yeah, go back to the
right.
letter of intent is what
Yeah.
you're doing,
Is-
really.
Okay.
We're trying to make sure that, like, A, keep your promises. We need to do everything in that letter of intent. It's a little bit nuanced because we have the opportunity to say, okay, we will do that for the county. Now, we still, I think, in the changing of this plan, need to say, this needs to be approved in the letter of approval from each of those subs, every single time. And if in 5 years, the county says, in 1 year, the county comes back and says, we're comfortable with 50%. We're comfortable with 0. Or it's up to how much are you allowing us to remove from your taxable base. And I think that's a good approach to handle this argument and then the next to come. A solution to get a yes.
So going back to the letter of intent, what does it say?
Well, that was the one.
But what does it say specifically? Does it say 100% exempt, I mean, 0, whichever your perspective is, but.
Well, that's what it says,
Yeah.
right? That's what the city commission had agreed to, is not exempting any of the base value
Correct.
ever. And just so I'm clear, what you're saying is that the political subdivisions could choose between 0 and 100% and of the entire value, so they could choose not to participate at all in the program in any way, or.
I go back and say, the question that we will ask is, in front of every single one of these divisions or subs, is that, do you approve of this plan? And if the answer is no, why? One of those for the county was because you're exempting our base. So the conversation is, what does that percent need to be in order for you to get a yes? That the county does approve that plan, because the goal isn't community support of exactly, the support is of the plan we create.
Right, and the county, so in
And it's
December,
not-
the
it
county
would-
did approve the plan in December
Correct.
contingent upon the letter of intent being met. So
Correct.
that happened already, and then our understanding was that if we had met all the terms of that letter of intent, that they would in fact approve the plan.
And
So
again, for the benefit of those not here, hopefully people are watching, what are the other points in the letter of intent that are already been satisfied? I mean,
Sure.
Let's distill this down to the one, is it one item, this one item?
that's the one that's in question. The other
Right.
was that the city commission would use their existing authority to appoint
Other members from the
Yep.
political subs, one of
Other
them's
members.
here today.
And then the other point was that any amendments to the development plan would be voted upon by all of the other
Correct.
political subdivisions. And then the fourth point was that there would be a member of each of the boards present and voting on the Renaissance Zone Authority going forward, or at least they would have the option to
Correct, okay.
create that.
So it really does circle back to this one item, okay?
yeah.
Yeah, if you come on some of the other stuff, but I don't think we can get out of I'm trying to say we get out of it, but there are different avenues to get the same thing done, that I think cause less headache in the future, but, I mean, it is what it is.
Okay. Kate, you had your hand up.
Yeah, quick question. This is going to be like where you say, well, what does the word is mean? So I apologize. We'll muddy the waters a little bit. You say the base value. So I'm thinking of a very specific project where there's a building on the property right now that would be demolished. So let's say it's demolished in March. Well, all the assessments are made in February. So unless that property is reassessed without the building on it, that property owner is going to pay the base value on a building that no longer exists. but they're gonna do new construction. So is that new construction? Is that purchase with improvements, or is that rehabilitation? I don't know. Or would someone have to wait, demolish it, wait an entire year for assessing to come back in February to give it a new assessment before they could start their project? Because I think that's what we're gonna run into with this larger project over here.
What's the reassessment process like? I have no idea. Daniel, do you know? I mean, is it,
My next question.
yeah.
Thank you for.
I mean, maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
Sure, and then I'm not an expert in this, but it happens annually. So February 1st is really the,
But under her scenario, you know, it's assessed February 1, then along comes March, and they knock down the buildings that are there that aren't contributing any value anymore.
right, the valuation won't change until the next February 1st. And they value anything that's in, so if there's a project underway and being improved, they value it at a partial value while the improvements are occurring. But for a demolition,
Right.
and unless anyone here is from assessing, that's how I understand it.
Okay. So there is no, you can't request a reassessment in June or whatever.
Well, but wouldn't you then just go and ask for an abatement on your taxes then, because your building is gone, right?
So there is, yeah, you can request.
So they
an
would
abatement.
probably give you a prorated abatement for, I mean, you might pay tax for the month during the taxable year the building was there, but then if it's gone,
Seems to me, I mean, it seems like a
you
common
get an
sense
abatement.
approach.
Does that sound
City Commission
kind of
can,
familiar?
Yeah.
But if the assessed value comes in at the base level when they make the application, then what's in the
And so that's brings me to the paragraph above the one we were just discussing, is when and how are we gonna calculate that base value? You know, is it gonna, as the paragraph said, are we gonna go back 5 years, or are we gonna, what are we gonna do? So,
Do we even have the authority to, under the Century Code, I guess,
Yes.
to change what we consider the base value is? Of a,
The language for ad valorem taxation in Century Code is extremely flexible. It is the city can do some or none or all, or
Okay. Well-
we can, essentially, the city can do whatever it wants.
then that's the answer.
but can ours be different than the city's assessed value?
And that's, I think, I'm gonna go back to Kate's first words. It's the devil's in the details. It's what does current taxable value mean? And who sets current taxable value? Is it based exactly on the last property tax statement that was issued? Does a more nuanced approach at this table or the city commission table take an approach of, this is what the project is and what it's going to be? It's currently valued at 500,000, but they're gonna demolish the entire thing and start fresh and do new, so the current taxable value is determined to be dollar amount. So those are details I think we have to work out, we have to talk about, and I think we have to talk with that, like, these are a bit unique scenarios.
Right.
What do you guys think? Well, I don't know. But I think those are great questions, and you're gonna have a very difficult time thinking of every scenario in front of you. So you need to look at structuring it in a way that allows
Common sense.
common sense to take place. Like, we don't wanna wait 9 months to do a project because someone didn't assess it. But we also need to have some level of trust with the other subs, either at this table, if they're voting members, or as a general way of doing business on how do we approach things like this?
So I guess we don't have to use the assessed value the city has or the county has. We can name our own assessed value
Is that correct,
for the project.
Daniel, to your knowledge?
I personally agree that that is correct, as long as the development plan spells that out. I mean, because really, the authority is in the hands of, well, not just you, but the city commission and
Right,
the
sure.
other boards.
Final, yeah.
And Authority Member Fink is correct. It's at your discretion what percentage you'd like to give.
Well, then that solves the problem for me. It's common sense.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
go ahead, Wayne.
And here's the concern that Burley County Commissioners have, and I have it as well. I mean, when we have a project that they are collecting $25,000 in property taxes on, based on the value of the project prior to construction. And this board then sets the new value, and those property taxes go from 25 to 5, Now I'm asking the rest of the residents to pick up that 20,000. That's the problem that Burley County Commission has. You're asking the rest of the residents, because you've lowered that valuation, to pick up the tab. And you will never get Burley County Commission's approval if we do things like that.
Even in the scenario that Kate was, the
Well,
hypothetical, that's what I was.
That's an
referring
interesting question.
Because it's only fair.
Correct. If you're taking and raising the building, you're getting rid of it.
Yeah. That's what I
It
was-
has zero value at that point, other than land, and so that would be a good question for Burley County Commission. We're using the one scenario that happened recently where that $25,000 disappeared out of the taxable collections. And I had to then raise everybody else's taxes to pay for it. That got to be a concern,
Okay, fair enough.
and that's
Mr.
one of
Chairman?
the big reasons.
Dustin,
Yeah, so we don't include the cost of demolition in the spend required to qualify for the exemption. And the downtown design review has to approve demolitions in the downtown zone. So between those two things and what Commissioner Munson is just talking about, that the whole point of this entire line item is to hold harmless the county, then it wouldn't make sense if we're just making up a new value, that the baseline needs to be the baseline of whatever was generating the revenue that the county received in the previous year. That is the baseline. And it doesn't require making something up. It just requires that is included there. And it really would seem baffling if we were to design this in a way to get around the whole point of what the county's demand on this one line item is.
Wayne?
And I appreciate where Dustin went with that, except all political subs are asking their residents to pick up the difference of that tax. Some may be acceptable to that, the county is not.
In the case of demolition?
No, in the case
Okay.
of going from current
Okay,
value.
well, fine, I
down. Yep.
understand that.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
going back to demolition.
Demolition.
Yeah, just as, the thought that I had around that scenario, Kate, would be that there needs to be a distinction between a new construction project, which would be bare land currently, or entirely raising and building new. We have the hotel project, let's take an example. A portion of that building will be, so is that a new construction or is that renovation? And you can look at saying, if you can design it, we can stop. To answer Dustin's question, I don't see how we wouldn't start with current taxable base value based on the last property tax assessment. I don't see why we wouldn't use empirical data like that to say, this is where you start. And then we get into conversations with the county or the other subs, or how we implement on what about these types of scenarios where a building is partially or completely raised? Do we look at saying the current taxable value as a percentage of how much of that building is going to be remaining in place? Like, there's other avenues to take to say it's either all or nothing. You can get some more nuance there and be able to say, well, this kind of makes sense. You're going to keep 90% of the building. You're going to continue to pay 90% of the current taxable value. You're going to get rid of the entire building and start fresh, build brand new. Is it okay if we mark current taxable value at land?
Land value.
There is no ad valorem taxation. There is nothing added to the land. So there's different pieces of that. I think that there needs to be a bit more nuance and a bit more follow through in how would these types of scenarios take place, built within the plan that we need to look at developing to get approval.
Right. and
As
I
long as
think-
we have that authority, I'm
But
comfortable.
what you decide here, I think, will change that project. So if that project is complete, well, I think what has already been decided has already changed that project, because they were looking at keeping part of that building. Well, now there's no point in rehabilitating part of that building. You should just tear it all down, and get it to zero. Does it get it to zero? We don't know that yet. Does that make it now a new construction project? Does it make it purchase with improvements? Does it make it rehabilitation? I asked Daniel, we think probably would make it new
I think
construction.
new construction, yeah.
and those have different things as well, but the developer needs to know that on the front side. So they're not gonna dump a bunch of money into architectural renderings and not understand the difference between all of that, and if I demolish the whole thing, do I go back to zero? So we need some level of assurance that they know which avenue to go down, before they dump a bunch of money into a project.
Yeah, and just to kind of continue on that, one of the things we're supposed to be cognizant of is historical preservation, and encouraging demolition is really kind of against that entirely.
Well,
So-
it depends on the circumstances. I mean, it depends on the individual project
I don't
and
disagree,
property, so.
but it certainly doesn't encourage anyone looking at the numbers to say, I'm willing to go, like any historical preservation, right? I'm willing to go through the hassle of doing this, to be able to maintain that historical preservation. There's cost and benefit to both, but I can see plenty of argument there, but
We should have saved the Fleck Motor Building. Right? You don't even know where that was.
think no.
It's got a $30 million building on it called Broadway
Yeah.
Center today. Okay, moving right along, is there any chance today that we can come to some consensus on these items and get it,
Well, I think that we
get a
should,
checklist form?
I think that we're probably gonna have to maybe have a deeper discussion on the base value, but maybe if staff comes back with something for us, then we can
Well, I think we need to
continue
give
the
staff some direction.
conversation. Pardon?
I think we need to give staff some direction on where we want to go.
Well, I think that, I don't know, I think what I'm hearing is that the base value should be whatever it was the year before the project started. And then that we need to think about a percentage of that, if it's gonna be a tear down that happens in the middle of the year or something. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Right?
I
agree.
would defer over here and say,
I
does
would
that make
agree.
sense?
That would make sense.
Fair.
I think it makes sense to
Yep.
me, but
So that would be a good starting point, and then if there are other scenarios that come up between now and our next meeting, either we talk about them at the next meeting, or they're gonna have to be decided on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I'd be willing to have a special meeting between now and March meeting, if it helps. I mean, we just kick this can down the road another month, and all of a sudden Commerce decides they need an AG's opinion. That could take 6 months to a year.
Yep. it's just,
We're just not doing anything.
there's absolutely no reason for an AG opinion. And, I mean, I know you have to,
I think we better
Not our
do it.
call.
That's gonna take longer than a month.
Yes.
Well, we should just ask for it now.
Have they given you any idea how long an AG's opinion takes?
My understanding is maybe 6 months,
Yeah,
Yeah.
or about.
sure.
Yeah, I'm probably on a conservative estimate.
At
So,
least 6 months.
Yeah. Well, then the legislature's not in town, that'll help, but.
Chair, authority members,
Yeah.
if, one thing as well, there will be probably some debate on the language that we provide to you as well. So there's, if you wish, we can, take the input you've given us today and any more input you'd like to give today and draft something and then let you have a target to shoot at and wordsmith from that point as well. So there's no need to necessarily delay that.
yeah,
I'm fine with that.
I had provided you, Daniel, with that email earlier, kind of what through my thoughts, and I don't know if that's changed at all as far as terms are concerned or things that we need to be concerned about. What is current taxable value? Obviously, some thought needs to be put into that. Taxable value increase rather than and what that gets taxed at. The language I kind of kicked around with Daniel was something to like the following limits are to the exemption of ad valorem taxation per taxing district are city, park, school, and state up to 5 taxable years after project completion, up to 100% of current taxable value, and up to 100% of taxable value increase. And for the county, up to 5 taxable years after project completion, up to 0% of current taxable value, and up to 100% of taxable value increase. So something along those lines where you could say each taxable district has a current taxable value percentage and a taxable value increase percentage associated to it. Really, the only difference between our plan currently and what it needs to be to seek reapproval at the end of the year with the county is that current taxable value needs to be, for the county, 0 exemption.
Yep.
30 members. One thing that you may want to consider is if a political subdivision just wishes to participate at the same level as the others, say that's their desire, it may depend on which one gets asked first. You may have the city, for example, may not want to go in all in if the county is not, and if schools and parks are not, and they're the only ones doing that. And so there could be a little iteration here, and I don't really want to put our commissioners in that position where they are kind of being asked first and not sure how the others will respond.
That's a good point.
Well, I guess I didn't envision us asking them first. I thought we'd ask them last, just because, we can't take a complete plan to them until we've talked to everybody else. So, I wasn't trying to set them up or anything. I just didn't think it would be practical to do it another way. The only other thing that I think might be kind of controversial in terms of new stuff in the plan would be the definition section. So, and that didn't really indicate, this document didn't really indicate what was going to be in that definition section, although I think it's a really good idea.
Okay.
Clarity is always good. And then I did have one last question. I think I know the answer, but under the revision processes and the last bullet.
Page 5.
Yes. That public hearing that's referenced, is that our public hearing or the city commission's public hearing?
So traditionally, the public hearing has been held by the Renaissance Zone Authority, and then you convey that to the city commission, and they have not held a public hearing in the past. It can change, but that's how we've been doing it.
Okay. Very good, thanks.
So, does anybody have any heartburn if we start on page 5 with the easy ones, the revision processes, and work backwards then? To give Daniel, again, some guidance as he refines and tweaks, and is that, Joe?
Yeah, I had a comment on the revision processes, and I mentioned it earlier, just that there are a lot of things within this board that the other subs just aren't going to care about.
Correct.
Do you care about downtown design review? You get to, because you're on this board now.
Yep.
But do you care about text amendments? Do you care? There are a certain set of things that I think we should categorize in, these will not change within the plan without seeking approval, going back and getting that approval from all of those subs. But this other set of stuff within the plan is the city's to manage, is the city's to worry about. And what those things are, obviously, are going to matter. And so that we're not need to go back in front of every single sub every single time we notice, like, this needs to change. This should change. We have a different vision. It's non-consequential things to what matter to those other subs.
So are you okay with the wording that's on page 5? Or anybody else?
I'm good with them.
Yep,
So
I
let's
think
move
it's
on.
fine. Yep.
Okay. Dustin, consensus on that one, revision processes?
Yeah, I'm fine with that revision process as long as everybody is clear on it. There's going to be a role for each of the appointees from each entity on this board to be representing as far as whether they are okay or not okay with what is happening here. Okay. So that there's going to be a check and balance built in there.
Same with the bylaws, the next item up the page.
Well, I guess.
Oh, Joel?
I guess in the last sentence, or sorry, the last paragraph, the second sentence, it's you had the public hearing and then affirmed by each political subdivision, means that any change in this plan, we need to go get affirmation from those political subs.
So 30 members, and so that was a question that we did ask Burleigh County at the time, and that was their request.
And I think that's because they took the approach of, we don't want certain changes, but I can think they can be appreciative of, there's a bunch of stuff in here we don't have to care about, or we don't care about. that you could probably change, but things like how much tax exemption you're able to provide, or exactly how you treat commercial versus residential, like there are things that they have to care about in the plan, and certainly things that they don't. So I think it would be good to differentiate which those are, and say, these ones don't need to go in front of everyone, these ones do. That you may not agree, that is just my opinion.
I'm not sure how you're gonna,
I think you're gonna have to run them all. I think
It
you're-
doesn't change that often.
no.
No.
That's it. It's a 5-year process, right?
No,
Well,
how many times in the
well-
last 2 years have we changed the plan,
we
Daniel?
can amend it.
3 maybe. We amended, the main changes are for the map changing.
Yep.
That's the
Yep.
primary change. But that is our understanding from Burley County, is that they would want to see all of it, and we may as well bring it to the other boards as well
Yep.
if we're bringing it to Burley
Well,
counties.
Yeah, I think we have to, whatever we do for one subdivision, we have to do for all
I
of
get where
them.
Joe's coming from. If we change the word "they" to "them," or, but I think we're probably, you're gonna spend all day defining what
Yeah.
rises to the level of going to all the
Right,
subs.
just,
Do it.
Do it all.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's more work for staff, but,
I was just saying, then it's up to them whether
Yeah.
or not they want to look at it or not.
okay.
So,
Bylaws, same thing. Comments? Same process.
I'm good.
Consensus there, and again, moving neatly backwards. Amendments, we just covered that, right, on page 4. I'm just going from bottom to top.
Yep.
No changes necessary for future revisions, no changes recommended, if anybody has any. Consider removing, I'm under the promotion of marketing, consider removing the requirements to brief political subdivisions annually on the program. I'm fine with that, but I don't know if that causes heartburn across the table, because again, everybody will have a voice at the table,
Yep.
so, makes sense. Dustin, you're with us? Moving right along.
Yep. That seems fine to me.
Dustin, where are you? South Dakota?
I am in Pierce, South
Oh,
Dakota.
boy. Okay,
Yeah.
we can talk later. Administrative roles and responsibilities at the top of page 4, or near the top of page 4. Consensus? Comments?
It's okay
Joe?
with me.
The only comment that I would make is that you can certainly do exactly what what the letter intended, without saying the county board has to approve someone to be on this, you can do exactly what we had here and have a commissioner appointed by the city commission, by the mayor, and offer seats. At this point, does the school board or park board even care?
No,
And
do-
if they
do they
don't,
want
do
to?
they have to
Right.
do it anyway? Like,
Well-
extending that invitation, I think, is great, and reserving a seat for them is great. If we don't, I mean, obviously, they would care about taxation issues.
Yep.
If we don't have a quorum for downtown design review, we can't get business done.
That's a good point.
Now, I would, one point to consider too, I know the city commission has appointed me to this board, but Steve is the portfolio holder from the county.
Yep.
So is that 2 of us on this board?
No.
That's why I'm bringing it up. Because, because the city commission has appointed me, but Steve is the portfolio holder. So at some point, this group has to decide,
can
are
we,
we both on?
Doesn't the county commission have to decide who they're gonna appoint?
That's what this.
County
would say.
commission has already decided, but
Okay.
that was just the last meeting.
Okay,
I was appointed prior
to fill a vacancy.
to fill a vacant spot. So that everybody is aware of that.
can we word it some way that the county commission would appoint somebody and then just, is there a way just to say that city kind of approves that already if we list it technically? in
Or
there?
we say only one representative from each political sub.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And
Right.
then,
there
then
you go.
since you guys have
You gotta go away.
decided,
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go away and Steve would
Or
come
you
in.
guys fight that out.
Yeah,
Yep.
you become
thumb
Steve.
rustle it.
Oh, no, arm. I want to do a thumb.
Yeah, I think that,
But again, I wanted to bring that up because, again, Steve was appointed just recently as the portfolio holder, so.
Yeah,
So
because I
it's
was
a-
just gonna ask for clarification if you were
Well, it makes sense.
the empty and if there, if
One
you were
voting
the.
member.
One
Yeah,
voting member.
one voting member.
But am I a voting member from the public?
Well, you're a voting
As I
member
was-
of the Burley County Commission.
Okay,
That's the way I interpret it.
I didn't read
Yeah.
I wasn't part of the meetings, so.
Well, I think that was also the intent.
It was the intent, right.
Yeah, and I don't, the city needs to keep its word, and if the city said it was going to do this, it's which approach the city takes to do that. I don't see any problem with changing the bylaws and saying, this is how the board will be made up. But going into and saying that the county commission needs to appoint someone to be on this board, it's a matter of, if the sub doesn't care about it, and they're fine with how the plan is working and how we're administering this program, they may not want to appoint anyone.
Would it be appropriate to approach the other subs and ask them if they wish to have representation?
That was our understanding, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's
Yep.
do that. And if they don't want to, then we still have to adjust the,
One
Steve?
question though, how do you manage if some political subs do and some don't, so that you have an odd number?
correct.
Yes.
That was the tail end. Yep, I agree.
To figure out as
Yep.
well.
Yep. Yeah, we'd have to balance that out. So we'd have an odd number.
I think you need to
Okay.
address that within your bylaws and just how many others at public or at large would be appointed by the mayor.
Okay.
City commission.
Or,
It's
and
easy
you,
enough to
and
do.
if one political didn't want to, you could always add at large.
The seat would be reserved for them, and if they don't have someone that wants to participate, then
Well, there,
I keep short number, then the mayor would appoint someone else. They
Whatever
still have
they-
a seat to fill, right?
oh, I was gonna say, whatever they decide is good for 5 years, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
either they have someone or they don't.
Right.
And if they don't, then the size of our,
Yeah, but our seats are, what, three, Daniel?
3-year terms?
That's correct.
right, but their decision, whether or not they want someone sitting here is their 5-year decision.
Right.
I don't think so.
No?
I would think that they would have that opportunity every time a seat was vacated or they had a commissioner leave for any reason, they'd have to
Well,
fill
and
it
that's-
again.
but-
Like, there's a whole mess that comes along with that,
Yeah, but you're gonna have to outline that then, and put that in.
which is
writing.
why our seat is reserved for this board, should they want to appoint anyone.
So
But I think they need to tell us that.
Yeah, otherwise we can't manage our
Yeah.
quorum.
We can't be
Because if
just
they
jumping
appoint
back and
someone
forth
and they never
between
show up.
4 subs, 2 subs, 1 sub. They tell us up front, and it's good for 5 years.
Yep, agreed.
I should add one caveat to how we currently have this set up. So the appointee from the city commission is not on a 3-year term. Authority member Zanker is functions
Perpetual.
as a portfolio holder,
Yeah.
and so he stays as long as the commission wishes him to.
Okay, we're stuck with them. Oh, was my mic on? Okay, it was clear as mud on that one. So moving backwards to page 3, I think we've flogged project exemptions enough, and Daniel's got enough
Yes.
notes taken to come back to us. Moving up the page, there was no changes recommended. You're going to update the data and milestones, concurrence with comprehensive plan, that's all standard language,
Yep,
as far as I see it, everybody?
agreed.
Well, we're almost back to page 2. This is exciting. You had a question mark by removing the map. I think it's the consensus you want to leave it in, Nancy? Update or remove the map of the approved projects, you want that kept in?
I think it's good to keep it in.
It doesn't hurt anything, I'm fine with that, okay? No other changes until we get up to the definitions. And I guess you maybe will tell us what context those changes might occur in.
Yes.
If it's just, again, if it's just semantics, right? Instead of saying board, instead of authority or something like that, I don't think we're gonna care. So, but current taxable value might be a different matter. Which, by the way, we always use whatever the assessor has, don't we? So,
That has been what we've used.
okay. Okay. Anything else on that page? Dustin, anything? Page 2?
Nope, nothing for me.
Wow, look at us go. Let me get us out of here by 5:05. And then page 1 is just fiscal procedures. I don't know if there's anything we need to flog on that one. Okay. Daniel? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
The only other comment, we've talked about it a number of times, but the goals and how we measure success with this program matters, and that might be different for the county. Like, what are you going to be able to present to whoever cares to say why this is being successful or how it's being successful? So the metrics you track obviously matter. You know that, just to say it.
Any questions, Daniel?
No, and I think we'd use the same performance metrics for all the
Yeah.
political subdivisions. And if they choose to emphasize some more than others, that can happen. We can track everything.
So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to make these revisions and get them back to us. Do we want to try and meet between now and March 14? If I'm in favor of that. Can we pull something together in a couple weeks? Because you have to notice this, or if we have a special meeting.
So we do, although the special meeting notification is just on the day of, that's not a problem.
Okay,
We
okay.
do, if you want to call a public hearing, although I wouldn't recommend doing that
Not
yet.
at this stage, no. No,
And so,
no. Okay,
yeah, I will say, so the next step would be to take the whole development plan and do a strikeout and underline, and implement these changes you've asked for. It may take a little more than 2 weeks just to get all that ready.
Well-
I know some language I have already, but,
okay. Get back to us, I guess, as soon as you have some dates that we can kick around and when the room's available, right? You gotta check that calendar. Because literally, we've got 5 weeks, right?
Right.
So maybe the end of February, the 29th, it's a leap day. Some of us might want to leap off the roof of the building by the end of the meeting, but it's okay. Okay, so, I mean, we kind of have to leave it open and up to Daniel and when we're going to collectively assemble again, so, all right. Any other business? Anyone have any other business to bring before this August body? Kate?
If somebody puts in an application next week, what is the process?
Well, we're still conducting business as per usual, to my
Okay.
knowledge.
Design review and Renaissance zone
It's my
is
understanding.
as is right now.
We're renewed for a year.
Okay.
Daniel, correct? I mean, I'm not.
I don't
think
know.
I'm
I don't know what's
speaking-
going on
I
anymore.
don't think I miss.
I do have one question that I think maybe Kate was getting at. So if we do have projects that are come forward right now, is it my understanding that you would likely not grant a 100% taxable value and that you would choose to use your authority you have now to mimic a incremental increase, or would you grant the full 100%? And that's something I think you would have to decide.
I think we'd have to decide it based on the project and at this table with everybody's opinion.
Okay.
I can't speak for everybody.
I mean, the county's at the table,
Yeah.
so.
The only comment that I would make is that I mean, the city is committed, and at least one of the commissioners flat out said, we need to change now the base value, the taxable base value.
The
That
process.
it cannot be 100%.
Yeah.
And I think without a shadow of a doubt, there's some nuance there we talked about, but apart from that nuance, I would have a very tough time approving 100% if I saw a project next month.
Okay. And the reason I ask
Without
is
some other, there
Yeah.
needs to be something there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
because I'll need to be able
It's a
to
good-
direct our
good faith.
applicants so
Yep.
they know what to
Dustin?
ask for.
It's a question of acting in good faith within
Sure.
the next year. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other business? Anyone have any other business? Hearing and seeing none, we stand adjourned unless there's an objection. We stand adjourned until March 14th or at the call of the chair when Daniel gets a date to us. So otherwise, we'll meet again in March too. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your input.